Chapter 18. Olav moved out to Saltviken. The work afloat had to be done from Hestviken. Here was no other quay than the little boat pier of piled stones. No boathouse or warehouse, but only the little sheds by the salt pans. And it would be a great piece of work to make a harbour in the open and shallow bay. Saltviken could be made a good corn-growing farm. Eirik had been right there. Olaf sailed up to Hestviken, went on board his own boats, spoke with Cecilia on dark winter mornings on the quay, but did not go up to the manor. Yet he knew that his son-in-law let fly abuse of the old man that haunted the beach. He knew that his daughter's husband could not cope with any of the things that had been placed in his charge. He had to depend on his old tried folk and on Cecilia. But it had come to this, that he thought himself obliged to pretend a trust in Jorund Reaper, even though he had none. What folk said of it all, it was clear that he himself was the last who would hear of it. But it could not possibly be any secret that he had chosen ill in choosing a husband for his daughter. And as to Eirik's conduct, Jorund had let him hear what everyone thought of it. Eirik had meant to take revenge on Burs, and a dastard's revenge. So he only got his deserts when he found out that the old adulteress was too sly, and that he was the one who was caught. Olaf was wearied to death of everything. This turmoil in which he had been caught up, when he had to swallow Burs's insults. And he had controlled himself. For Eirik's sake, he had controlled himself more than he believed possible. And then Eirik behaved like a hothead, without a thought of honour or of anything but his own caprices. When at last this turmoil had calmed down, Olaf felt that now he cared for nothing more. Now it was all one to him. But he would not give up for all that. He would have to continue the fight against disgrace and misfortune. He would stake all the respect he had won in the country round against his neighbour's judgment of Cecilia's husband. Affect to think that Jorund was worth his salt, and that his shield was untarnished. And at the same time, while living at the deserted manor, he tried secretly to keep an eye on everything, to direct and advise, whether Jorund liked it or not. It might well be that, in that way, he might bring about better times for Cecilia and her children. Now that he could play the master at Hestviken, Jorund had found friends. They were not the best men of the neighbourhood, and he himself was quarrelsome and unamiable. With luck, he might come by a few inches of cold steel. And Eirik, who had acted in such a way that there was no excuse for his conduct. He must be banned from home. And it was better so. Would he might never have to look on this creature again while he lived. Olaf should have foreseen it, that time when he came home and found Ingunn with calamity incarnate in her womb. That he would be haunted by this spectre throughout his life and never find peace. He had hated him, despised him, hardened his heart against him, wished him dead, and longed for him, believed in him, when the other deceived him, wished him well as soon as he allowed himself to be deceived. This stranger had been more his own than the children whose father he was. Time after time he had believed that the curse was turned to something else. The bastard to a son of whom he was fond. And then the changeling had always swung to the right about, and he himself was left deluded, the victim of scorn, and of what was worse and smarted more keenly. But now it was finished, and well it was. Yet ever and anon he caught himself thinking of Eirik. He longed to tell Eirik what was in his mind without restraint. He longed to see him. Time seemed long to him out at Saltviken a whole winter. He lived there alone with Knut Ragnarsson, and the young wife the lad had lately married. One day in spring, Galfred Richardson came unexpectedly to Saltviken to see him. In the evening he told Olaf his business. There was a man who sought the hand of Galfred's youngest daughter, Alice, and Galfred himself was willing enough to have the man for a son-in-law, but he wished to speak to Olaf first. "It is that Bjorn, the son of Torhild of Torhildsrud. So, you are his father." Olaf answered he had gotten this son while his wife was yet alive, so he had no right over the man. But if Bjorn needed help to establish himself, he would not refuse. "I didn't mean it that way," said Galfred. He only sought to know whether Olaf had anything to say against the marriage. Bjorn was doing well, and his mother and stepfather were now prosperous. He had become acquainted with the young man last autumn when Bjorn hired the smithy in their yard. He was to make the ironwork for the new doors of St. Lawrence's Church. It was some of the knights of the king's bodyguard who had made this gift to the church. Bjorn had acquitted himself of the task in such fashion that one of the knights would have him forge 2 branched candlesticks and an iron-bound coffer for the chapel of ease that stood on his manor. But when Bjorn brought these things to Arn and claimed his reward, the knight deemed it too high and would chaffer. Bjorn made answer that if Arn could not afford to give what the church claimed, he could afford to present the knight with both coffer and candlesticks, but he held that no one other than himself could judge what his work was worth. Then Arn gave him the sum he claimed. Now Bjorn Olafsson had bought himself the house he needed in the old Gullbringen yard. Olaf knew it, next below Fluga yard, between Sigrid's yard and the river. After this, Olaf had a strong desire to see Bjorn once more. At Margaret's Mass he found that he had business in the town, and on Sunday, when he came from Mass in St. Halvard's, he went down toward the yards which lay at the bottom of the slope, by the river bank. Gullbringen was the largest, and it had 3 courtyards, one beyond the other. The houses around the inmost yard stood on the very bank of the Alna River. There was a smithy, a stable with lofts, and a fine stone house. A great rosebush grew against the wall of the dwelling. Beside it stood a young man and 2 women who bent down and smelt the roses. Olaf recognized a young, slender one with the long auburn plaits. She was Alice Galfridsdatter. He had seen her at her father's house. The other was one of her married sisters. Alice had seen him. She whispered something to the young man. Then she turned and went, giving Olav Audunsson a shy greeting as she slipped past. She had a fine, healthy, freckled face, wore a rose in her bosom, and carried roses in her hand. The man came up slowly and greeted Olaf. "Have we such great honour?" His smile was boyishly self-confident. He must be 20 now, thought his father. "I had a mind to see you again." "And indeed it is long since the last time, and the years seem to have dealt hardly with you. You are grown old, Olav Audunsson, but go in." So he sat on the bench in the smith's house, and in the corner opposite sat the man who was his only son. The lad was handsome, as he himself had been in his youth, a good deal bigger in stature, but not so shapely and well knit. But he had the same fair complexion, the bright silvery sheen of hair and eyebrows, the white skin and clear grey eyes rather far apart. Olaf soon found that it was no easy matter to converse with Bjorn. He had nothing to say to him. His mother, his stepfather, his brothers and sisters, they were all well and prosperous, and so was Bjorn himself. His house declared plainly enough that the young man held his own. "You are young to be a householder and practice your craft as your own master. I have stood on my own feet since I was 15. Olav said he would like to see proofs of Bjorn's skill. He had heard it greatly praised. Bjorn replied that he had nothing here which was worth showing. But you can go up to Lawrence's Spittal and look at the ironwork on the south door of the church, and the 3 candelabra that hang in the nave. They are the best I have wrought till now. I have no leisure today, or I would have gone with you. Is it true, asked Olav with a little laugh, that the master of whom you learnt your craft is a giant? He told me nothing of that, and I never ask folk uninvited questions. This was meant for a reproof, his father saw, and he was inclined to smile. Never had he seen a man so heartily self-sufficient as this lad. But he was a good smith, no one better in Norway, said Bjorn. He went across to a chest, came back, and handed Olav a lock and key for a coffer. I made this while I was with him. The locks I make now are more cunning. If you like it, you may have it, Olav. Olav thanked him and praised the work. It is not from your father's family you have this skill, he said tentatively. We were never good handicraftsmen in our race. I know nothing at all of my father's family, replied Bjorn in a clear voice. And that you resent, said Olav in the same tone. Bjorn looked him straight in the eye with his pert young smile. No, Olav, I do not. You begat me, and I say you did well in that. And you have done no more for me since. Then, I hold, you have done me no ill there. Olav looked at his son, wondered whether the boy knew what he was saying, or were these words put into his mouth. Bjorn got up and went to the shelf over the door. But you must think I am inhospitable. He filled the cup and drank to his father. Hail to you, Olav Audunsson. It cheers my heart none the less to know you have sat on my bench for once. Olav accepted the drink with a little smile. I cannot say that your looks betray it, Bjorn. It was wine, and good wine. Oh, but I mean it, and I wish you to have a token to remind you of it. Again he went to the chest. This time it was a brooch, fairly large and gilt all over. In the centre was an image of Mary with the child, and around it a wreath of bosses, each of which bore an angel's face. No, Bjorn, that is far too great a gift. I will not have it. Yes, take it now. Don't you remember I had a gold ring of you once? Is it that you wish to quit scores with me, then? No, not that either. I may tell you, Olav, it is with that ring I shall plight my troth to Arla Skalfridsdatter at Clement's church door on the eve of Lawrence's Mass. It will be honoured, then. As Bjorn went with him to the door, Olav asked, Your mother, she is well content with your choice of a wife? Mother. For the first time Bjorn's smile was purely gay, with no challenge in it. Mother is content with me, whatever I do. That is well, replied Olav. Then I know that you have always done what is right and manly. They pressed each other's hand at parting, and Olav went. Olav walked over toward his inn, half smiling. He might rest content with this Bjorn. Young and overconfident, but they were faults that life mends in a man, and God grant the lad might lose little of himself in the mending, so that the man might fulfil the promise of the boy when once he was full-fledged. What Bjorn had said was true. He might have done more for this son of his. Other men treated such matters differently, had their bastards brought up in their own homes or in those of their friends. He had indeed given the mother her farm, but Bjorn seemed to count that for nothing. And true it was, she owed her prosperity to herself and that husband. And if Thorhild had not married, perhaps he and Bjorn would have seen more of each other. Although the true reason was that he felt he could not bear to look a son constantly in the face, whom he had no power to bring into the family and set in his place. So all else he could do was worth nothing. And whatever the lad had meant in saying it, there was truth in his words, that if he had done nothing for Bjorn but beget him, he had thereby done him no ill. The son who stood outside the family and would not call him father. He was also outside the family misfortune.